They say rivers remember not just the things dropped in them, but in's bodies. Prayers, but why they were dropped. They remember the sounds of last words, the scent of blood before it hit the water, the weight of decisions no one speaks of again. And in Ashford Hollow, Ohio, the river remembers what the town has spent 100 years trying to forget. Clara Ashford, 13 years old, daughter of the doctor, and the first to disappear. She was last seen in the orchard behind the house, the one lined with crooked apple trees that never blossomed at the right time. Some bloomed in winter, others wept sap, like blood in spring. One tree had no leaves at all, just small, dark hands growing where fruit should be, but no one ever cut it down. That winter morning in 1832, Clara stepped outside barefoot. The frost had come early. She told her younger brother Paul the night before that she heard someone singing in the orchard. A woman's voice, soft and wrong, like a lullaby remembered backward. She said the trees leaned in to listen. By sunrise, she was gone. No footprints in the snow, no torn fabric on the thorn bushes, only her shawl, laid neatly across the chapel gate. And the bell, the one in the steeple her father swore had been broken for years, rang once. Just once. No one had pulled the rope. The Ashford estate stood just beyond the last curve of the river road, wrapped in black pine and fog. Locals called it Ashford Hollow, but the land had older names, names from before the county existed, names whispered only when no wind stirred. The original deed was dated 1789, but the foundations were older, stone on stone, fitted without mortar, dry laid like something ancient. The walls hummed when touched. No one knew who built the place, but everyone knew who died in it. Dr. Silas Ashford was a respected man, clean coat, clean hands, quiet mouth. He had delivered half the town's babies and buried their parents. But when his daughter vanished, something in him broke, not visibly, not loudly. He simply stopped speaking Clara's name. At the sheriff's inquiry, he said she sleepwalked, always had, said she wandered at night, that she once woke up at the chapel altar, hands muddy, eyes blank. His wife, Miriam, said nothing at all, not then, not ever again. After Clara vanished, Miriam began to wear black veils indoors. She paced the house humming songs no one else knew, and some nights, neighbors said they saw her kneeling in the orchard, facing the wrong way, not toward the house or the trees, but toward the river, listening. A search was organized. Dozens came with lanterns and dogs. They combed the woods, the hills, the cellar, but no one searched the pond. Not the one in the far northwest corner, the one lined with cattails that didn't bend in the wind. Children said it had no bottom, said frogs went silent near it, said you could throw a stone and hear it splash forever. On the third day, the sheriff declared Clara missing. Not dead, just gone. The Ashfords held no funeral. There was no service, only a candle in the window and a note on the chapel door that read, "Do not pray for her. She is not beyond reach." No one ever admitted to writing it. But here's the part no one says aloud. A week after Clara vanished, 3 other children in town reported strange dreams. In each one, they saw a girl standing under the river, barefoot, hair floating upward like smoke. She had no eyes, only a voice, and she kept repeating, "Tell Paul I'm still here." They told their parents told no one, but the dreams didn't stop. One child, Daniel Greaves, sleepwalked into the river 6 nights in a row. The 7th night, his mother tied him to the bed. In the morning, they found the rope untied, floating near the bank. Daniel never spoke again. Paul Ashford, just 11 at the time, was kept inside after that. The doctor boarded the windows of the nursery, built a fence around the orchard, carried a pistol into the chapel, and Miriam, Clara's mother, went upstairs one night and never came back down. She wasn't buried, but her bedroom door was nailed shut from the inside, and no one ever asked how. The townsfolk pretended the hollow didn't exist. Maps left it blank. Newcomers were warned not to go near the property line, but every year, on the first frost, the day Clara vanished, the bell would ring again. Once, only once, always at dawn. And then silence. But silence is a kind of noise. And the house, that awful house at the edge of the woods, never really stayed empty. It just waited, listening, counting. And the river, well, the river didn't just take her. It opened for her, like it was told to. 17 years passed, and in that time, Ashford Hollow was barely spoken aloud, even in the homes nearest its edges. Children learned early not to ask why the road curved the way it did, or why the trees near the river grew in spirals. Old folks crossed themselves when the wind came from the northeast, and every year, without fail, on the first frost of November, the chapel bell rang. Once, only once. No one ever went to check it. No one wanted to see who rang it. It was late autumn in 1849 when the letter arrived. No return address, no signature, just one sentence, in handwriting so fine it looked pressed by bone. The house is ready again. Send the boy. The letter was delivered to the Hollows County Hall. The mayor at the time, a toothless man named Errol Finch, read it aloud once, turned pale, and immediately handed it to the sheriff. He didn't touch it again. The boy was no boy anymore. Paul Ashford, now 28, had spent the better part of 2 decades under the ward of a family in Columbus, polite, distant, and quiet as dusk. He rarely spoke more than a sentence at a time, but when he did, his voice carried an edge, not sharp, not angry, just old, too old for someone his age. He never visited the Hollow, never asked about Clara, but he kept 13 stones in a pouch around his neck, smooth, black river stones, and every morning, before he shaved, he counted them. When word reached him of the letter, Paul didn't react, didn't speak, didn't blink. He just nodded once and packed a single bag. He left the next morning on horseback. The family that raised him watched him ride away in silence. The mother wept, the father crossed his heart 3 times. He arrived at the Ashford estate just before dusk. The house had not been touched in 17 years, and yet the door was unlocked, the porch swept, the windows clean. There were flowers in the vases, candles on the mantel, unlit but fresh, and on the kitchen table, a bowl of fruit, perfectly ripe, not a single fly in sight. Paul walked through the threshold slowly. He did not hesitate. The house did not creak. It inhaled. That first night, he lit the fireplace, placed his bag by the stairs, and entered the library. He stayed there for 3 full days, no lights, no food, just him and the books. Some were familiar, medical journals, old encyclopedias, maps. Others were not. One in particular, bound in soft, gray leather, no title on the spine, only a black mark on the cover, a circle with 13 short lines around it, like a sun, or a mouth with teeth. Inside, the ink shimmered faintly, the words bent under candlelight, and on the first page, the names of the forgotten shall be spoken again. When he emerged, his eyes looked wrong, not frightened, not haunted. Empty, like something else had stepped in and taken inventory. He did not eat. He did not sleep. He went straight to the chapel. The townspeople heard the bell that evening. Not one ring, 3, spaced out over an hour. No one spoke of it, but every ear heard, even those deaf since birth. And every clock in town, from farmhouse to courthouse, stopped at exactly 3:13 a.m. Over the next week, Paul was seen walking the perimeter of the property, tracing the same path every day, clockwise. Muttering, counting. Sometimes people claimed to hear a second voice with him, a child's voice, sometimes a woman's. One farmer claimed he saw Paul standing in the orchard just before dawn, holding a lantern that didn't cast any light. The farmer turned away for just a moment. When he looked back, Paul was gone, but the lantern remained, still burning. By the second week, Paul had boarded up every window in the house, except one, the attic's west-facing window. He would sit by it each night, unmoving, for hours, just watching the trees, until the chapel bell rang again. Then came the drawings. He carved them into walls, scratched them onto mirrors, burned them into floorboards, spirals, branches, a girl's face without eyes, a circle, always the circle, the same symbol from the book. He did not speak to the townspeople, but he did begin writing. Short notes, folded neatly and left under stones at the edge of the hollow. 13 of them scattered across town. Each bore a different message. She walks the orchard in dreams. The 13th door is opening. Mother sings in the attic. He comes when we forget his name. The circle never stops. Not gone. Not forgiven. She has 13 voices now. Do not listen to the bell. The room without floor is breathing. The house is not a place. It is a sentence. The roots are inside us. You prayed the wrong direction. Paul is not Paul. Asterisk no. One knows how he placed them. But each was found. Each one exactly where someone needed to see it. On the 13th night, something changed. The trees around the hollow bent outward. The ground trembled, not like an earthquake, but like something large shifting underneath. And every animal in the town began screaming. Dogs, cows, even birds fell silent mid-flight. People shut their windows, lit candles, began to pray. But they didn't know which direction to face anymore. At 3:13 a.m., the bell rang. But not once, not 3 times, 13. Each one louder, each one closer, and in the center of Ashford Hollow. The lights in the house all flared to life, every window glowing from within, even the attic, especially the attic. Inside, Paul stood by the open west window, holding the gray book in one hand and a small child's shoe in the other. His voice was calm, clear. He whispered, "It's not a haunting, it's a return." And behind him, the door to the 13th room creaked open. Though no such room had ever been built, the orchard never grew right, even when the trees bloomed, and sometimes they did, violently, in the dead of winter. The fruit came out wrong, soft in the middle, too many seeds, or none at all. Some of the apples bled when cut. Some had tiny teeth, but the worst of it was the smell. The trees gave off something sweet and sick, like sugar left in the sun, like meat behind wallpaper. Clara had once told Paul that the orchard could hear thoughts. She'd been 9 when she said it, and Paul remembered that she had looked angry when she said it, not scared. She told him, "You're not supposed to think anything mean near the roots. They remember, they bite back." He'd thought she was joking. He didn't laugh. Now, 17 years later, Paul walked the orchard each night. His footsteps followed a pattern, a spiral that widened with each pass. He carried the gray leather book in his coat, and in his right hand, a candle he never lit. Some said they saw him kneel between the trees and speak aloud, but no one ever heard words, only the tone, soft, familiar, like a lullaby without melody. Once, a local hunter claimed he saw Paul standing perfectly still beside the oldest tree, the one with no leaves. He said Paul was listening, nodding. He also said he saw something move inside the trunk, something that looked back. The 13th night after Paul's return marked the first snowfall of the season, and that's when the dreams began again. Not for Paul, for the townspeople. Children woke screaming. Mothers felt cold breath on their necks as they slept. Old men heard knocking under the floorboards, and 13 people, 13, dreamt of Clara. She stood in the orchard, her face lit by moonlight. She wore the same white nightdress she'd vanished in, but her mouth was gone. Only smooth skin remained. In each dream, she raised a hand, pointed toward the house, and behind her, the trees leaned closer. At the hollow, Paul stopped going inside the house at night. He slept in the chapel, curled up near the altar, but he never used a candle. The air around him shimmered faintly, like heat on stone, though the building was ice cold. He prayed, but not with words, with breath, with silence. And every morning, he'd write a name in chalk on the chapel floor. A different name, sometimes in English, sometimes in something older, sometimes just initials. The names faded before dusk, but they always returned. The next morning, darker, deeper, scratched into the stone, not written. One morning, Paul awoke to find his hand stained black. Not ink, not ash, something colder. The mark didn't come off, and by nightfall, it had spread to his arm, thin veins like roots, trailing up toward his shoulder. He didn't speak of it. He just kept writing, kept walking the orchard. He whispered to the trees, and sometimes they whispered back. Then came the first visitor. Her name was Sister Winifred Talbot, a nun from St. Eliza's Convent, 20 miles north. She arrived in a black carriage, uninvited. No one knew how she'd heard of Paul's return, but she said she had dreamed of Clara every year since 1832. When she stepped onto the property, the horses screamed and bucked. She stepped out calmly, crossed herself with water she had boiled herself that morning. She approached Paul in the chapel and said, "She's near the roots now, too deep for light." Paul nodded, told her, "You've come too early," she replied. "No, you've come too late." Sister Winifred stayed one night. By morning, her hair had gone fully white. She refused to speak of what she saw, only said, "There is no God in that house, only memory." She left a small crucifix on the altar. By nightfall, it had cracked in half. By morning, it was gone. The following week, 13 more people reported visions. Not dreams this time, visions, in broad daylight. One boy swore he saw a girl with skin like river glass standing beneath the Ashford chapel window. A widow claimed her dead husband stood at the edge of the orchard, mouth sewn shut, holding their daughter's baby shoes. A farmer woke to find 13 small handprints on the inside of his barn door, and he had no children. The visions always happened at 3:13, always in silence, and always near something made of wood. Paul began marking the trees. He carved circles, spirals, symbols that shimmered in the bark even after the knife was gone. He said he was binding them, not protecting, not preserving. Binding. One night, someone overheard him whisper to a knot in the wood, "You took her. Now take me." The knot bled, a single drop. Black as pitch, the town held a quiet vote. They considered sending a priest, a demolition crew, a fire, but no one dared act, because those who spoke most strongly about raising the hollow, they vanished first. The schoolteacher, then the mayor's brother, then a child named Elsie, who had once picked an apple from the Ashford orchard on a dare, all gone. No screams, no footprints, just silence. And in each case, the chapel bell rang once, exactly 31 minutes after the disappearance. Paul kept count. In the gray book, beside the symbols, he now wrote a single word over and over, "Return." It filled 13 pages, and on the final one, he drew something new, a face, Clara's, but not quite. Her eyes were empty sockets, her mouth stitched, and behind her, something towered. A shape, thin, long, root-like. It had no face, only hands. Too many hands. One night, Paul entered the orchard barefoot. He carried no book, no candle, only his mother's black veil. He wore it over his face. He knelt at the base of the oldest tree, the one with no leaves, no fruit, the one that hummed. He whispered, "I remember the name," and the ground opened. Not cracked, opened, like breath, and Paul dropped something in, a tooth, his own. The tree shivered, and then still. From that night on, no birds nested in the orchard, and the apples, what few remained, began to rot before they fell. But the house began to glow at night. Each window lit, faint and pulsing, like something was breathing behind the walls, and the 13th door, the one no one built, was no longer locked. It stood open. Always. Waiting. The Ashford house had 13 rooms. Everyone knew that. It was in the blueprints, filed and signed and stamped in the county records. But blueprints are written by men, and the house had other plans. The 13th door had no knob, no hinges, no frame, just a tall, narrow linen. The hallway between Paul's old nursery and the cold room, where jars of his mother's preserves once lined the shelves. No one remembered when it first appeared, not even Paul, but he dreamed of it, night after night, the same image, the door open wide, a narrow stairwell behind it, descending into something deeper than stone, something older than dirt. And always, always, at the bottom of those stairs, a voice, not calling, not crying, just speaking, soft, patient, waiting. Paul first opened the door on the 26th night after his return. He did it at exactly 3:13 a.m., with the candle unlit in one hand and the gray book in the other. The air behind the door was cold, not winter cold, deeper, like something beneath cold, like something that had never once been touched by sun. He stepped through, one stair at a time. The wood groaned beneath him, but the groan wasn't quite right. It sounded like breath. With each step, he heard names, not spoken aloud, but in his chest. thudding softly. Clara, Miriam, Paul, Clara, Clara, Clara. Then other names, names he didn't know, or didn't remember, but they remembered him. He reached the bottom after what felt like an hour. There was no light, no walls, just space. But it wasn't empty. The ground pulsed beneath his feet, soft like flesh, like something turning beneath a blanket. And in the center of that vast dark, a chair, simple, wooden, with a mirror placed in front of it. He sat, and the mirror didn't show his reflection. It showed Clara, 13, smiling, but her smile was wrong, torn at the edges, like it had been cut into her. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Paul reached out, pressed his palm to the glass. It was warm. And then he was no longer alone. They don't speak of possession in Ashford Hollow. They speak of overlay, of remembering too deeply, of letting the past through your teeth. When Paul came back up those stairs, he looked the same, but the way he moved, different, like someone trying on a body, learning how the joints worked, how much pain the knees could take. And his voice, when he spoke again, wasn't one. It was two, layered, male and female, soft and not soft at all. He said, "The door isn't to below, it's to before," then laughed and wept. After that, the chapel windows cracked, the orchard stopped growing, and the pond out back, it boiled. For 13 minutes, without fire, without sun. The frogs were never seen again. Paul kept the door open every night at 3:13. He sat before it. He never entered again, but he spoke into it. Pages from the book, names, prayers. Sometimes the door whispered back, but only in reflection. One night, he placed the mirror from the attic in front of it, and the next morning, it shattered from the inside. The frame was untouched. The town, by then, had begun to change. People forgot things, important things, their own names, their children's faces, the order of the seasons. One family planted corn in December. Another baked snow into bread and swore it tasted of sugar. A third gave birth to twins, one with teeth, the other with a veil over her eyes. The town's memory fractured. It bent around the hollow, like a wound trying not to remember how it was made. The preacher tried to intervene. Father Nathaniel Bell, age 62, had served Ashford Hollow for 40 years, held baptisms, marriages, burials, but not Clara's, never Clara's. He marched to the gates with a brass crucifix, a red Bible, and a small vial of holy water his mother had given him. He never made it to the porch. At the orchard's edge, he dropped to his knees, eyes wide, mouth open, silent. The grass beneath him blackened. His shoes caught fire, and he wept, without tears, for 13 minutes. When they carried him home, he was blind and smiling. He said, "She was waiting, with a chair just for me." Paul didn't stop him, didn't even come outside. He just sat before the 13th door and listened. There's a word in the book, one written 13 times on a single page, in red, subsistence. Below it, in smaller script, that which feeds itself through memory. Paul read that page aloud every night for a week. Then he stopped reading altogether and began writing his own pages. He added them to the book, stitched them in with hair and wax, and those new pages, they didn't stay still. The ink moved, the letters rearranged. One page pulsed like a heartbeat. And one night, when he flipped to page 13, his hand caught fire. Briefly, softly, the fire didn't burn him. It marked him, a ring like a wedding band, round the base of his finger, black, faintly cold. People began to gather outside the gates, not to protest, not to help. To listen. At night, they claimed the air shimmered near the house, that the sound of Clara's voice, layered, echoing, childlike and ancient, drifted through the trees. She sang lullabies, or something that almost was. And always, the sound of a chair scraping slowly across wood, then stopping, then scraping again, like someone was dragging it closer. The 13th door remained open. And every time someone looked directly at it, whether in dream or memory, they saw themselves older, lonelier, WRONGER. And behind them, Paul, smiling, or something wearing his smile. The house no longer needed walls. It had memory. It had mouths. It had Clara. And now, it had opened. By the 5th week, the house had begun to rearrange itself, not in ways a carpenter could measure, but in ways a person felt. Rooms changed places. Hallways stretched or shrank depending on who walked them. Doors that once led to the pantry now opened into the nursery, and the nursery sometimes led nowhere at all. Paul never flinched. He adjusted to the shifts, like someone returning to a dream he already knew the shape of. He said the house was remembering itself, not haunted, not cursed. Just waking up. The 13th door, always open, had become a source of heat, not warmth. Heat, the kind that rose from underground stone, from breath trapped in catacombs, from old mouths beneath newer floors. Paul began keeping a ledger, not of events, but of sounds. Each night at 3:13 a.m., he sat near the door, eyes closed, and recorded what he heard. A girl humming with no breath, wood being split from the inside, weeping. That echoed like water in a wellsome mething scratching at the inside of the mirror. From the other side, and once, just once, he heard his mother's voice. Miriam, dead 17 years. She whispered, "It's not a house, it's a wound," and then laughed until the glass in the hallway cracked. The mirror from the 13th room had been moved upstairs. Paul placed it in the attic, covered with a black shroud. But every morning, the shroud had slipped off, and the chair, the one that should have been in the cellar, was now placed before it. As though someone had been sitting, as though someone still did. He started sealing the doors behind him. With chalk, with wax, with small symbols in river-mud. Each mark was unique, each one drawn from memory, but not his own. They came to him in dreams. He woke with them already in his hand. Then the reflections began. Not in mirrors, in glass, in puddles, in the sheen of an apple's skin. Townsfolk saw things that didn't move when they did. One girl combed her hair only to see her reflection staring at her, unmoving, lips parted. A man went to shave and saw a mouth behind his own shoulder, smiling where no one stood. The Reverend's widow looked into the rain barrel behind her house and screamed for 2 hours straight. When they found her, her eyes had turned entirely white. She spoke only once. "The orchard drinks us, one drop at a time." Paul did not stop. He opened the 13th door wider, placed fresh candles on either side. None were ever lit, but they burned down each night. And always, the chair was moved. He brought offerings, not blood, not bones, but memories. The first was Clara's old locket, still with a wisp of her hair. He set it on the floor, and the flame nearest the door flared blue. The second was a page from Miriam's diary, one that ended in mid-sentence, "I still see her at the window." The third was Paul's own tooth, the one he'd pulled with, shaking hands. After that, the chair stopped moving, because whatever was in the chair no longer needed to. That night, Paul fell asleep in front of the door, and in his dream, he was back in the orchard. The trees were taller, twisted, some reached into the clouds. Clara stood in front of him, her back turned. She was singing a song, with no words, only breath. He walked closer, but when he reached for her, she turned, and her face was his. She whispered, "I never left, I just fell in." He woke with blood in his ears, and the word remember carved into his forearm, shallow, neat, like a child's careful handwriting. After that, Paul stopped writing in English. All his pages became symbols or sounds. Some said he spoke backwards, some said he was speaking in tongues, but it wasn't new. It was older than English, older than Latin, older than time with names. People began collapsing in town, randomly, quietly, always at 3:13. 13 fell in 1 week. None died. But when they woke, none remembered who they were. One woman looked into her child's face and asked, "Is this my mouth?" A man named Thomas Wrigley entered the hollow with a rifle. His daughter had vanished. He blamed the Ashford house. He came to burn it. Paul met him at the gate, said nothing. Wrigley raised the rifle. Paul didn't move. And then, the chair. The attic fell over by itself, loudly. And the mirror shattered, not down the middle, but into a perfect circle. Wrigley screamed, fired once, into the air, then fell. They found him 2 days later, face pressed into the roots of the orchard's oldest tree, still breathing, but his tongue had been bitten clean through. No animal tracks, no signs of struggle, only the smell of candle wax, and 13 small teeth in a perfect line beneath him. Not his. Paul began to change. His hair whitened at the tips, his nails thickened, his shadow stretched longer than his body. Even at noon. He no longer blinked, and when people saw him walk the orchard now, they bowed their heads, not in reverence, in fear, as though they sensed what he'd become, or worse, what he was. Replacing. The 13th room was no longer hidden. Visitors could see it clearly now, even in daylight, but no one could photograph it. The images came out blank, or worse, every attempt to capture it showed only Clara's face, staring, smiling, sometimes blinking. One photograph, taken by a traveling reporter, showed the empty chair, but weeks later, the man slit his throat in a Columbus hotel. His suicide note read, "The chair followed me." Paul, on the 52nd night, stood in front of the 13th door with the book open, a single apple in hand. He cut it. It bled. He whispered, "One more offering, then take me." The chair scraped, backward, then forward, then stopped. He sat, placed the apple core beneath the mirror, and waited. And the house leaned inward. Every wall, every stair, like a throat preparing to swallow, not out of hunger, out of recognition. It was ready now, not for Paul, for what came after him. Some houses hold memories, others trap them. But the Ashford house did something worse. It remembered things that never should have existed. The 6th week began with a snowfall that never reached the ground. White flakes drifted down, but melted before they touched anything. Children called them ghost flakes. Elders whispered, the veils thinning, and in the hollow. Paul stopped writing. He didn't need to anymore. The walls were doing it for him. Messages began appearing in the ash by the hearth. Not scrawled, not written, etched. One each night. Clean, deliberate. Memory is its own hunger. She keeps breathing through the cracks. Do not follow the light in the well. One of you was never real. What you forget still remembers you. Paul read them silently, then nodded, as if he'd been expecting them all along. The townspeople grew pale, forgetful. Men left their homes and wandered into the woods, barefoot, mouths full of teeth they didn't remember growing. One woman walked into the river with her baby cradled in her arms, and stood there for hours, unmoving, unblinking, until the water receded. The baby was never found, only the blanket, folded neatly on the chapel steps, damp but warm, smelling faintly of burnt sugar and soil. Inside the Ashford house, the floorboards moaned even when no one stepped on them. Doors creaked open to empty rooms, chairs turned slightly when backs were turned, and the portrait in the parlor, once blank from age, had begun to show a face, Clara's, not smiling. Watching. Paul stopped eating. He took to sitting in the hallway outside the 13th door, whispering prayers backwards. Once, someone watching from the orchard swore they saw him levitate, just slightly, an inch above the ground, just for a moment. But it wasn't Paul that frightened him. It was the shadow behind him, tall, frail, root-like, holding Paul's shoulders like a father steadying a child for a photograph. The chair was no longer empty. Some nights, the house would emit a groan, slow, tired, old, as if it were adjusting its weight around something sitting too long. And on those nights, the mirror would fog from the inside. When Paul dared to wipe it, he'd find messages scrawled in breath. You forgot my hands. It hurts in the orchard. Let me out. He never replied. He just left offerings. A toy horse, his father's scalpel, a hair ribbon tied in threes. All of it vanished by morning. Only the chair remained. Then came the scratching. It began low in the walls like mice, but deeper, more deliberate. Scritch, scritch, pause, sc rich dash sc rich dash sc rich. Like a child trying to write something with nails. The sheriff visited the property, called it rats. He was last seen entering the house. They found his badge by the hearth, covered in ash. The message that night read, he's with me now. In town, mirrors were covered. Children were forbidden to speak Clara's name. Candles were burned backwards. A strange, fearful ritual no one remembered inventing, but all agreed upon. One child, Too young to know fear, asked aloud in school, "Why does the sky keep blinking?" He was sent home. That night, 13 birds flew into his window. Not one left a mark, but all were inside the room by dawn. The child would not sleep again. He just sat in bed, smiling, asking for Paul. Paul, now thinner, older somehow, stopped wearing shoes. The soles of his feet bled constantly, but he did not limp. He said it helped him stay rooted. Whatever that meant, he no longer responded to his name. He answered only to caretaker. The 13th door, it had grown wider. Too wide for one man to pass through, too tall for the house itself, as if the door had stopped following the laws of architecture or reality. And inside, the stairwell no longer ended in shadow. It pulsed with light now, sickly, yellow-white, like fungus grown. Over a lantern's flame. Paul stood at the threshold for hours some nights, staring into it. He once said aloud, "She's growing teeth. That means she's almost ready." No one knew what he meant, but that week, the river rose and did not recede. On the 66th day since his return, Paul found something beneath the orchard. Digging not with tools, but with bare hands he unearthed a small box, sealed with wax, tied with 13 lengths of black string. Inside, a tiny jawbone, still with baby teeth, and a note. Written in a childish scrawl, "I made this so I wouldn't forget." "But you did." Paul collapsed, not from exhaustion, from memory. He wept until his mouth filled with blood. That night, he lit every candle in the house. The whole structure glowed from within, from the road. It looked like the house was aflame, but no smoke rose, no fire burned, only light, and the sound of a girl singing. Not Clara, something else, using her voice, like a marionette dressed in her bones. Paul sat in the 13th doorway one last time. Facing the chair, he whispered, "If I remember it all, do I get to leave?" The chair rocked forward, and the house let out a sound no one could describe. Not a scream, not a moan. Something inverted, like a memory being unremembered. A mother forgetting a child's face, a name erased from its own birth certificate. In town, every mirror cracked, every watch stopped, every tree in the orchard leaned north, and the bell, the one in the chapel tower, the one broken since Clara vanished, rang 13 times. Each toll was softer than the last, like something walking away deeper, deeper, gone. Paul Ashford was never seen again, but the chair remained, facing the mirror, rocking. And sometimes, just sometimes, a small handprint appears in the fog. Only one, only ever one, but it's always warm to the touch. Some who lived near Ashford Hollow began to lose language, not all at once, just little pieces. They'd reach for a word and find a silence instead. A name they'd said all their lives would suddenly taste foreign in the mouth. A spoon might become that thing that holds soup. The moon became the cold face. The ones who remembered Paul's name started calling him the caretaker, and then just him, and then nothing at all. Children drew symbols in the dirt. Not taught, not traced, just remembered. A circle with 13 slashes, a tree with no roots, a house without a door, a girl with her mouth sewn shut. When asked who told them to draw it, they would reply, "The lady in the orchard." A widow named Dorothea Blevins lived alone at the edge of the hollow. She was old enough to remember Clara's disappearance, young enough to still climb stairs. She woke one night to find the walls of her home rewritten. Not with ink, not with blood, but with memory, scenes from her childhood, scratched gently into the plaster, moments she'd never told a soul, her mother's last prayer, her sister's drowning, the name she'd whispered during a stillbirth that no one knew about, all of it carved with a hand too small to be hers. When she tried to scrub it away, the sponge turned black. And the message beneath it read, "You remembered the wrong things." At the hollow, the orchard was breathing. The leaves didn't rustle, they whispered. Names mostly, half names, sometimes just syllables. And the wind that passed through the branches carried the faintest scent of iron and lilies. A traveling preacher passed through town, said he'd heard of the Ashford place all the way down in Kentucky, said he'd burned worse. "Hell don't scare me," he said. He walked into the orchard, singing psalms, and never came out. The The townspeople found his Bible 3 days later, open to a blank page. The only writing, 13 tally marks scratched deep into the leather. And on the very last line, ashes remember to. Then came the fog, thick, unnatural. It rolled, and not from the river, but from the house itself, from the windows, from beneath the doors, from the space behind the 13th door, though that room had long since disappeared from the house's blueprints, and from the memory of anyone who hadn't been taken in. The fog didn't choke. It whispered, and it carried things with it, shapes, sounds. Once, a face, a child's face, pressed up against a third-floor window from the inside. Even though the third floor had no windows, the new mayor called for a burning, said the house had to go, said, if we lose memory, we lose ourselves. But when the men brought torches to the gates, the orchard grew louder. Every branch bent inward, every apple split open, and the wind carried a long, low hum, like a song played backward on broken glass. Then the gates opened. By themselves, the fire never lit. Not one match sparked, not one torch caught. One man tried using gasoline. He disappeared mid-pour, left his boots behind, filled with blood. But no body, just 13 tiny footprints leading toward the chapel. They tried salt, failed. They tried prayer. It echoed back distorted. They tried forgetting, but forgetting only made it stronger. Some began to visit the house in secret, drawn to it, not by curiosity, but by recognition. They said the walls showed them things no one else remembered. A grandmother's voice, a brother's laugh, the way their father's eyes twitched before he lied. But they always returned, changed, quieter, paler, and always with one less tooth. One woman returned with 13 bite marks around her neck. Not deep, not violent, just there, delicate, intentional, like a warning dressed as a kiss. The 13th door no longer needed a house. It began to appear elsewhere. In dreams, in closets, in reflections. A farmer's basement revealed a new door overnight, tall, black, humming softly. When he opened it, all the milk in his barn turned red. His cows stood motionless for 13 hours, eyes rolled back, mouths whispering, let her speak. Children born in the town after that night came out, different. One was born with no shadow. One never cried, only hummed in low, perfect thirds. One girl refused to sleep unless facing north, hands folded as if in prayer. They all spoke the same word before they could walk, Clara. And beneath the hollow, the roots grew. You could hear them if you pressed your ear to the ground. A soft scritch, like pages being turned under soil, sometimes followed by the sound of a chair gently rocking, then stopping, then rocking. Again. An old man wandered from another county. Said he was looking for the house with the mirror that forgets you. He said he'd been dreaming about it since he was 12. Said he saw Clara every night in his soup spoon. He stayed in the orchard for 13 nights. On the 14th, he was found with his arms folded, seated neatly at the base of the oldest tree, smiling, dead. His eyes were still open, and each bore a different reflection. In one, Paul, standing in the 13th room. In the other, the house, empty, burning, with no fire. Some say Paul never left, that he became part of the house, that his voice is the one reading the messages in the ash, that his breath is what fogs the mirrors. One child said she saw him in her closet, holding the locket. He whispered, "You don't forget things like her. She forgets you back." And the chair, still there, still rocking. Some nights, people who've never been to Ashford Hollow wake up with splinters, or a single smooth black stone on their windowsill. Still damp, still warm. And always, always, the faint sound of weeping, from behind the closet door, or beneath the bed, or the mirror. Not Clara, not Paul, just a memory trying to come home. By the 8th week, Ashford Hollow was a town only. In shape, it still had roads, buildings, names on doors, but it had lost something fundamental. Not just time, context. It remembered facts, but not the meaning behind them. It remembered names, but not faces. It remembered Clara, but not why. And worse, it remembered things that had never happened. A wedding no one attended, a funeral with no body, a baby born with her own obituary already folded in her fist. The house at the center of it all, the one the maps no longer showed, had become impossible to measure from the outside. Still a simple two-story farmhouse, peeling white paint, dead vines clawing at the porch. But inside, the space shifted, expanded, refused to obey. Some said it breathed. Others said it pulsed like a throat. Either way, it responded to memory, to guilt, to sound. Especially sound. A historian named Dr. Felix Moore arrived from Cleveland, well-dressed, skeptical, armed with journals, recorders, and salt. He spoke to the townsfolk, dismissed their fears, said mass psychosis, said folklore, said trauma twisted over time. They told him, don't try to make sense of it. Sense is how it finds you. But he went anyway, entered the hollow on the 13th of the month, stayed 3 days. His final recording was found on the edge of the orchard, half erased, but the last line was clear. She's not a ghost. She's a wound. She bleeds memory. Dr. Moore was never found, but a notebook appeared beside the chapel door weeks later, all blank, except one page, a diagram of a staircase, drawn in ink and tooth scratches dotting the house. Paul's absence was a presence of its own. His coat still hung by the door. The gray book still sat on the chapel pew, its pages now blank, until opened. Then they showed only what you forgot, and the chair still rocked. The 13th door began appearing in dreams across the state. Farmhands, nurses, barbers, infants. People with no connection to Ashford Hollow began waking with memories they swore weren't theirs, names they'd never heard before, lullabies from a childhood that wasn't theirs, faces of people they had never met, but missed like family. One woman woke screaming and kept repeating, she's inside the apple, the one with no seeds. They found her that night, sitting in her orchard, naked, smiling, with her tongue tied in a knot and 13 apples neatly lined around her, each with a bite taken. Each left you neaten. The house no longer resisted entry. It invited. Letters showed up in mailboxes. Old paper, handwritten, always addressed to the recipients. Childhood nickname. Inside, a simple phrase, do you remember what you forgot? Those who opened the letter without burning it eventually went to the house, drawn, like gravity, like guilt. Most returned, but they weren't the same. They looked the same, spoke the same, but they didn't blink right. They didn't breathe right. They forgot birthdays, called their children by the wrong name. Some refused to enter their own homes unless walking backwards, and each of them, eventually, began to hum that same wordless tune Clara had once sung, the one without melody, the one without end. At the town's edge, a sinkhole opened. Perfect circle, 13 feet across. No one filled it. No one dared. Because at the bottom, there was light, pale, flickering, fungal, and a voice, not loud, just steady, repeating, the door remembers, the door remembers, the door remembers, and then the silence. It lasted 13 days. No birds, no wind, no voices, not even the sound of boots on gravel, just the soft ticking of the chapel bell. Once every 13 hours, no rope, no hands, just ticking, like time remembering how to hurt. It ended when the house opened again, fully. Every door, every window, every mouth. The townspeople gathered at the orchard's edge, drawn, terrified, silent, and the house sang, a low hum like a hive beneath the skin. And then the 13th room spoke. No one heard the same thing. One heard her father's suicide note. One heard the laughter of her drowned son. One heard the name she was never meant to give her stillborn daughter. And all heard Clara. Not Clara's voice, but Clara as a place, as a memory refusing to decay. A scream that had learned how to echo. One woman collapsed in the orchard, clawing at the soil. When they lifted her, she held a single shoe, child-sized, soaked through, still warm. Her voice was gone, but her lips kept moving. Don't let her sit in the chair. Don't let her sit in the chair. Don't let her. But it was too late. The chair no longer rocked. It creaked, rhythmically, like breath, like tide, like grief in a body too tired to hold it anymore. And in the mirror, which should have been shattered, buried, forgotten, there was no reflection. Just a hallway, stone walls, 13 doors, only one open, and a girl, standing, mouth stitched, hands folded, eyes hollowed out like candles. Behind her, Paul, not smiling, not weeping. Just watching, holding something small in his hand. An apple core, blackened, still pulsing. And across the state, wherever mirrors remained uncovered, a crack appeared, right down the center. Then split into 13 lines, and if you watched long enough, the cracks moved, not outward, but inward, as if memory itself had begun to collapse, not from time, not from loss. But from rot, because some things can be buried, others can be burned. But what is remembered wrong? It grows. The Ashford orchard was never meant to grow so wide. But by the 9th week, its roots had spread beyond the fence line, beneath the chapel, through the schoolhouse walls, under the homes of families that had lived there for generations. One morning, all 13 Ashford trees bloomed at once, in winter, with no sun. The blossoms were not white, they were pale blue, and each carried a scent no one could describe, but everyone remembered. A boy named Jacob Penrose, age 7, went missing on a Sunday. He'd been playing near the edge of the orchard, chasing shadows that didn't quite follow the light. They found his shoes first, then his shirt, then 13 perfectly arranged teeth in the center of the Ashford dining table, still warm, still wet, but no blood. The note beside them said, "He asked to be remembered," and people began to realize something terrible. It wasn't death the hollow feared, it was forgetting, not by others, by itself, by the house, by the orchard, by the thing behind the 13th door, because memory fed it. But memory was fickle, slippery, rotten at the edges. So it made its own. Clara wasn't just a girl anymore. She was a fact the house had invented, a wound with a spine, a song that needed to be sung in new mouths. The town held a meeting. They didn't call it a town hall. They called it a waking. They didn't speak aloud. They wrote notes, passed glances, moved candles in silent agreement. They knew what had to be done. The house had to be sealed, not burned, not broken. Buried. They hired men from across the state, strangers, ones with no ties, no names in the orchard, no teeth in the drawer. The men arrived with tools, maps, concrete, but the house didn't resist them. That's what terrified them most. As they approached, the wind died. Birdsong stopped. No dogs barked. No crickets stirred. They laid the first foundation beams for the seal at sunrise, and at 3:13 p.m., one of them fell into the crawl space. He landed on his back, screamed once, then whispered, "She's sitting." Now, when they pulled him out, his fingernails had grown an inch. His mouth was full of apple seeds, and for the rest of his life, he could not say the word door. That night, the town heard something new. Not a moan, not a chair, not the wind. A heartbeat. Low, deliberate, 13 beats, then silence, 13 more, then silence, as if something was waiting between them, as if something was counting. In the church, the pews turned overnight. All of them faced backward, toward the entrance, toward the orchard. Father Benjamin, the new preacher, was found sitting in the 13th row. He had gouged the word Clara into his own palms over and over, as if afraid he might forget her too. His final sermon was only one sentence: "She remembers you remembering her." Then he walked into the fog. They found his collar wrapped around the handle of the 13th door. Still warm, still humming. Paul's journal began to multiply. Townspeople found copies beneath their beds, inside trees, folded into the hems of clothing no one had worn in decades. Each one began blank, but the moment it was opened, it filled with memory. Not yours, just a memory. Like the book knew something you didn't. One woman opened hers and read a full transcript of a dream she hadn't had yet. Another found only one word on all its pages: return. The house no longer had a front. The porch had disappeared. The windows closed inward. The chimney collapsed in reverse, brick by brick back into soil. And the 13th room, now visible from outside. At night, it glowed, soft white, like moonlight beneath a sheet. And inside, the chair no longer faced the mirror. It faced the window. And sometimes it was empty. Sometimes it rocked. Sometimes a figure stood beside it. Not Paul. Not Clara. A boy. No eyes. No mouth. Just holes, where light poured in. And behind him, 13 doorways, all open, all breathing. Someone finally asked aloud, "What happens when we stop remembering her?" The answer came in the orchard. The trees bled. Not sap, not water. Memory. Dripped down the trunks in thick, black lines, ran into the soil, turned the grass gray. One child touched it, said it felt warm. Then forgot her mother's name, then forgot her own, then asked the school teacher, "What am I for?" No one spoke after that. Just prepared. The seal would happen at the 13th hour, on the 13th day of the 13th month, but there is no 13th month. So they made one. A memory month, a time outside of time, a ritual, space where forgetting could finally mean something. They dug a trench around the house, filled it with salt, stone, ash, and blood. Not human. Goats born without eyes, chickens who never crowed, a lamb that walked backward from birth, offerings, barriers, bribes. No one spoke during the burial, just wept. Quietly. Even those who had forgotten. Why, when the final stone was laid, the house did not scream, did not shake. It sighed, and the orchard went still. The roots stopped crawling, the door stopped humming, the chair stopped rocking, and for the first time in months, there was silence, real silence, not the kind that waits to be broken, the kind that knows what has been done. The townspeople walked home that night under a sky that did not blink. And for a while, they remembered peace. But beneath the seal, 13 doors remain, and they do not sleep, they wait, because memory cannot be buried, only fed. There's no name for the space they sealed it in. No calendar holds it, no clocks tick inside it. But those who live near Ashford Hollow know it's there. They call it the 13th month, not because it comes after December, but because it comes after forgetting. It's not a time, it's a condition. And once it touches you, nothing is quite the same again. The first sign of its return was the wind. It didn't blow, it whispered. Not across the trees, but through names. The wind said names, real ones, forgotten ones. Sometimes it said yours. Sometimes it said Clara's, and always at 3:13. No one spoke of the house anymore, not even in hushed rooms or back pews, but they felt it. In the sudden silences, in the cold spots near mirrors, in the way the orchard trees never rotted, never grew. They just waited, holding their breath, like a mouth beneath dirt, smiling. Then came the dreams. People across the county, ones who'd never stepped foot near the hollow, began dreaming of a girl, sitting in a chair, hands folded, mouth stitched, eyes empty. They'd wake weeping, not out of fear, out of recognition. One woman in Akron painted the same face 13 times before jumping from her attic window. She left a note. She's not gone. She's just behind the mirror. A boy in Dayton said he could hear the 13th bell ring each night, but there was no bell in his town. He said he heard it inside his teeth. His parents woke one morning to find him sitting backward in a chair, rocking. When they asked what he was doing, he said, "Practicing." And just like that, the 13th month began. There was no warning, no declaration, just change, a fog that never lifted, mirrors that didn't show what was there, old clocks that began ticking again, but backward, and with it came the scratching. Behind the walls, beneath, the floorboards, inside the trees. It was gentle at first, curious, like a child testing new nails. Then it grew bolder, hungrier. In town, a newborn spoke her first word on her first day, Clara. No one had said it around her. Not for years. The sealed house began to hum beneath its burial, a sound that made teeth ache, made memories twist sideways. One man returned to his family after a walk in the orchard, calling his wife by his sister's name, then by his mother's name, then nothing. He stared at her for 13 minutes and asked, "Which face do you want me to wear today?" They buried him in silence, but his grave grew 13 weeds overnight, none of them natural. Someone opened the seal. No one knows who, no one knows how, but the ground near the 13th room began to crack. Salt turned black, the roots stirred, and the fog changed. It began to carry a smell, not rot, not mold. But forgotten sweetness, the kind only remembered by children, the kind that makes your stomach turn because it was never real. And then came the first returning. A girl appeared in the orchard, age 13, eyes hollow, teeth none, name unknown. She held a ribbon in her hand, Clara's ribbon. When asked where she came from, she pointed to the ground dot, then to her mouth, then back to the ground dot, and she whispered she needed a mouth. I had one, others followed, one by one, quiet, polite, lost children with no past, adults with no name, all of them humming, all of them remembering things they had no right to know. A man from Columbus recognized one girl as his sister, who had died in 1974. He tried to touch her. She smiled, and he, aged 13 years and 13 seconds, died whispering, she waits for none, but she welcomes all. The chair reappeared first, not in the house, but in the church, center aisle, empty, rocking. Each night, it moved closer to the altar. By the 13th night, it sat where the pulpit once stood. Behind it, the mirror, whole, tall, perfect, and within it, a hallway, 13 doors, one open, always one open. And behind that door, the sound of breathing, not one person, not to 13 breathing in unison. Someone tried to shatter the mirror. They brought hammers, ropes, even fire, but the mirror shattered them instead. They weren't broken, just they scrambled. One man forgot his name, another remembered a death. That never happened. A third could only speak in Clara's voice. They locked him in the chapel basement. He still sings sometimes, only when the moon is gone, only when the fog touches glass. The 13th month won't end. Not on its own, because it never began. It's not a date. It's a return. It's a space made of grief, stitched from names, soaked in silence, and it waits for one thing only, a new mouth, a new chair, a new memory to rot. You'll know it's here when the mirror fogs for no reason, when you hum a song you don't remember learning, when a child in your street asks for someone named Paul and stares too long into the orchard behind your home, and when it finally ends, when memory curls back into itself, you'll find the chair in your hallway, still, rocking, waiting, and you'll hear the whisper you forgot how to forget. It's your turn to remember her. There's a moment, just before the dream ends, where you realize the room isn't yours, that the door behind you doesn't lead back, that the mirror is watching, and the chair has turned to face you. That's what chapter 11 became. For Ashford Hollow, not an ending, not a scream, but a turning. The moment the story stops being theirs and becomes yours. It began with the children, all 13 of them, born different, raised quiet, marked by the 13th month. They gathered in silence, in the chapel, in the orchard, in the burned-out schoolhouse where Clara once tied her ribbons. No one told them where to go. They just knew each held something, a tooth, a stone, a page from Paul's journal, a key with no door. And they began to hum, not a song, not really, more like a remembering made into sound. It echoed through the trees. It cracked the mirrors. It bent the WEATHERVANES. And it made the chair, the one locked beneath the seal, move, not rock, not creak. It turned to face the orchard. To face you. In homes across the county, people woke with splinters in their palms, in teeth they didn't remember having, with songs bleeding out of their mouths like dreams left too long in the sun. One woman found her grandmother sitting in the corner of her kitchen, dead 30 years, crocheting nothing, humming Clara's lullaby. When she blinked, the woman was gone. But the chair remained. The mirror cracked again, but this time outward, not from violence, but from pressure, as if the thing behind the glass had finally decided to step through, and the fog, the thick, humming fog, spilled into every window, every closet, every mouth that had forgotten how to say her name. The people of Ashford Hollow gathered for the last time, not in the church, not in the town square. In the orchard. The trees were bare now, but not dead, just watching. And in the center stood the girl, 13 years old, eyes hollow, mouth stitched, fingernails black with soil and ink. She held nothing, because she was the offering. Behind her, Paul, or what was left of him, a shadow in his shape, a voice in his throat, a memory walking around in borrowed skin. He said only one thing. She wants a story that won't forget itself. Then he stepped back into the 13th doorway, and the orchard closed behind him. The children began to speak. All at once, one voice, 13 mouths. She remembers everything you threw away. She keeps your lies safe. She drinks the ink from your blood. She waits behind the 13th breath, and she is ready now. Then silence, not absence, just a held breath. And in that breath, the chair moved again. The chair, always waiting, always rocking, was no longer in the house, or the chapel, or the orchard. It was everywhere. Every dark corner, every reflection, every room you've forgotten how to enter. It faced you in sleep, faced you when you blinked too slow, faced you in that moment before the light switch clicks, and it whispered, sit. Those who didn't return, not as themselves. They came back humming, came back teeth first, came back with eyes to clear and hands that forgot how to tremble. One man carved a door into his chest, said it was the only way to let her out, died smiling, died open. And inside his ribs, a 13th tooth. Perfect, still warm. In basements, the roots stirred. In wells, reflections changed. In closets, the smell of lilies and blood returned. One mother opened her daughter's wardrobe and found herself inside, weeping, younger, tied at the wrists with hair. She asked, have you remembered yet? Then vanished, leaving behind a pair of shoes filled with apple seeds. And in the house, buried, sealed, forgotten, the 13th door cracked open wider. Now you could see inside. A hallway, 13 mirrors, each reflecting not your face, but your worst memory. Not distorted, not dramatized. Just real. And waiting. A man in Missouri tore his own tongue out, said it was the only way to stop telling her story. But it didn't work, because the chair kept rocking. Paul's voice was heard one final time, on a tape recorder, found beneath the chapel floorboards. The tape was blank until the 13th minute. Then, softly, she's in the story now, and the story doesn't need us anymore. Click. Silence. Then, humming. The children, gone. No footsteps, no screams, no goodbyes. Just drawings left in dirt. 13 symbols, a door, a mouth, a seed, a chair, a girl, a ribbon. And in the center, an open book. With no words, just a mirror where the story should be. And now, you. Reading this, hearing this, you've made the turn. You've felt the weight, heard the hum, seen the chair. Because once the story knows your name, it writes you down. Just one line, just enough. Just enough to bring her back. And somewhere behind you, in your hallway, your mirror, your teeth, a chair waits, facing you now, rocking. It's time to remember. Some stories end when the last page turns. Others end when the last body is buried. But this story ends when you stop pretending it isn't about you. Because you've read the words, heard the hum, felt the quiet shift behind your reflection. And now, the door is open. Not theirs, yours. The Ashford house never burned. It never crumbled. It was not defeated. It was retreated into, like breath drawn inward, like a name swallowed before it could be said. But now it stirs, because it remembers. You. In towns across the state, cracks formed in sidewalks in the shape of doorways, not random, not natural, 13 bricks wide, 13 inches deep. And each one hummed, softly, only at night, only when no one was listening. A woman in Toledo lifted her rug to find a staircase she didn't build. It spiraled downward into soil. She descended 13 steps before her candle went out. She never returned. But her daughter woke the next morning holding her mother's ribbon. Still knotted, still warm, mirrors across the county began holding. Reflections longer than they should. You'd walk away, but your reflection wouldn't. You'd blink, and it wouldn't. And in the reflection's background, always behind your shoulder, a chair, facing away, then not. The chair is the story. It's what you sit in when you surrender your version of things. When you stop resisting what you already know. It doesn't ask. It invites, and it waits. And once you sit, you remember, not all at once, not in words. In feeling, in weight, in the way your teeth ache before you weep. Back in Ashford Hollow, the orchard bloomed one final time, but the blossoms weren't flowers, they were eyes. 13 per tree, watching, blinking, crying sap that smelled like ink and milk. And at the center of the orchard stood the chair, empty, for the first time, waiting. Paul's journal was found again, buried in the roots, wrapped in skin. Its pages now complete. Not a story, a list, names, hundreds, maybe thousands. Yours among them. Some crossed out, some underlined, and next to each one, a symbol, a door, a ribbon, a tooth, a mirror. Yours has the chair, facing forward. A boy named Ellis spoke in tongues for 13 minutes. Then, clear as thunder, he said, "The chair doesn't move. You do." You turn toward her, and then he fell silent, forever. There's no more Ashford Hollow now. On maps, it's a blank spot. On roads, it's a wrong turn. On tongues, it's a place you taste but cannot name. But in memory, oh, in memory it grows. 13 rooms, 13 voices, 13 chances to forget what cannot be forgiven. Clara is no longer a girl, not a ghost, not a grief. She is a language, a way of speaking pain that the world refuses to understand. A shape that returns when forgetting has gone too far. She lives in empty chairs, in stitched mouths, in the sound a ribbon makes when it's untied in the dark. She is what waits when no one remembers why they locked the door in the first place. And now, you've heard her story, or rather, it's heard you. It's written itself into your breath, your mirror, the pauses between your footsteps, and the next time you see a chair where it doesn't belong, facing you, still, silent. Don't look away, because you've already sat, long ago. Before the story began, before Paul, before the orchard, before the door cracked open, you were the one who let her out. The 13th door is not behind the house. It's behind your teeth, your ribs, your eyes. It opens every time you forget who you were before the story found you, and it will open again, not with fire, not with blood, but with memory. And when the final mirror cracks, when the chair rocks by itself in the corner of the room, when you wake to find your reflection staring the wrong direction, remember this: Clara is not coming. She's already here. The story ends not with silence, but with the hum. Low, familiar, from beneath the floorboards, from inside your chest. It hums because it remembers, because you do too. And just before you close your eyes, just before the lights flicker and the ribbon slips loose, you'll hear one last whisper from the chair. Now, tell it again.